Up next, we have Charge Enterprises. The ticker on the OTC is CRGE, and joining us is the founder and CEO, Andrew Fox. How are you?
I'm great, Brent. How are you?
I am having a great day. It's a good Friday. I usually have good Fridays, but like today is an extra good one. So thank you for asking. And I will, without further ado, hand it over to you. I can see your presentation there, so take her away.
Sure. Thank you all for listening. I'm Andrew Fox, founder and CEO of Charge. We're having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to just say next slide a couple of times. First, our safe harbor agreement, and then just perfect into our company history. So we were founded January of 2019. I was an early investor in Lime Scooters, the micromobility company, and was really the impetus for this idea. In January 2019, I had this thesis that electric vehicles, predominantly at the time, micromobility vehicles, lack infrastructure. And so from January of 2019 to April of 2019, we locked up exclusively real estate for being the exclusive charging partner for micromobility. In November of 2019, just briefly, we won our first major agreement with the city of Paris. And then as we all witnessed the pitfalls of COVID, we kind of came out of it on the other side. We reversed into a public vehicle October of 2020. We had a 5-point plan. It was to acquire businesses through the telecom and EV space. I'll now get into that. But in 2.5 short years, we now operate across 12 time zones in 19 countries. Next slide, please. We have two interlocking kind of divisions. Our motto is connecting people everywhere with communications, infrastructure, and charging. We do that in the infrastructure space, specifically in electric vehicles and micromobility and personal charging. And then on the communication side, our business model is connected calls and telecom network infrastructure. Next slide, please. So as I said a minute ago, our mission, connect people everywhere. And so the way that we see it is telecom, network infrastructure, connected calls, power banks, EV, charging infrastructure, all this unglamorous work, so to speak, in the world of EV and telecommunication is what we specialize in. And because this EV revolution is starting upon us, millions upon millions of EV charging stations need to be deployed domestically. And we don't manufacture these stations, we install, maintain, and service them. Next slide, please. The market overview that we are talking about is relatively large, $200+ billion. And these markets are maturing and continuing to evolve. And so I think that continues to grow, but a very, very large addressable market that we're in. Next slide, please. Our team, today, we're a relatively small team, just under 50 people full-time. Myself and my two co-founders, very, very active entrepreneurs in building businesses. Next slide, please. So our strategy, establish ourselves as the global leader in the installation, operation of EV charging and portable power banks and telecom network infrastructure. It really is the unglamorous side of the glamorous world of telecom, so to speak. But we expect to be the most trusted infrastructure organization in the world. And how we do that is we provide superior hardware, location selection, engineering, installation, testing, and maintenance through this entire life cycle of charging. And from a strategic standpoint, it's a very new industry, the EV space. And so we're pioneering being kind of the infrastructure side of it. Next slide, please. From an infrastructure standpoint, this is where we got our roots. So no, you can keep going. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to put this at a high level perspective, there's, domestically in the United States, there's almost 290 million cars. Today, only 1.7 million of those cars are EVs. That number is expected to grow to close to 20 million by 2030. And so when you think about where we are today, domestically speaking, we have 100,000 charging stations. That's it. We need in the neighborhood of like 10 million. And so there's this just straight up upward trajectory in terms of the infrastructure that's needed to power the EV revolution. Next slide, please. So we do, like I said, the unglamorous part. That's fine. We do the unglamorous part in terms of selecting the location, installing it, servicing it, and maintaining it. And the way that we see it is because that's a bit of the long pole in the tent for both the manufacturers of electric vehicle charging stations and for the automotive industry, we're looking to find a way to remove that friction and help accelerate the transitions away from kind of fossil fuels into more electric vehicles. Next slide, please. And just to go into, once again, the unglamorous part, that's what we do. We look at the EV world as a bit of the Wild West right now. And our business model is akin to pickaxe and shovel work, or pickaxe and shovel selling to that glamorous, EV world. And so we expect to be the most trusted infrastructure company. And by providing the services that we do, we're more like Switzerland to most of the companies. And that's a good thing, because the infrastructure side of it, if you don't have the infrastructure, you're not going to sell as many electric vehicles, and you're certainly not going to do as much charging. And so we find ourselves uniquely positioned to not only take advantage of it, but also be the most trusted source for this type of work. Next slide, please. So once again, this is where we got our start in micromobility. We saw the scooter Armageddon, so to speak, plastered all over cities. We believe that it's a safety issue as much as a business issue. But if you look at where micromobility was yesterday and where it is today, it operates in over 150 markets and over 1 million scooters deployed already. And so our infrastructure, even though we pioneered this at the early stages, it's still really only, the first inning of the micromobility game. Next slide, please. This is a new product that we will be introducing this summer. We made a strategic acquisition at the end of last year in a business, and what we saw was that North America was ripe for this type of market. It's a clone of a business that we saw in Asia, but we think that if we're in the charging business, then we have to offer portable power, micromobility power, and electric vehicle infrastructure. Next slide, please. And now from a communications standpoint, this is a bit of our Trojan horse. So we do telecom network infrastructure and tower service work. We provide all of the engineering and furnishing and installation in telecom. The way that we see this is that this is a hedge against what we hope happens in the EV space, but if it doesn't, we're still, very, very well positioned to grow our business. Next slide, please. So we have a global reach in our business today. Like I said before, we operate in 19 countries across 12 time zones. From a business standpoint, our customers are the largest telcos in the world. Those telcos are very, very hard to break into. And so the services that we provide to them today are very defendable. Next slide, please. So from an investment highlight standpoint, we're a global business, like I said before, with interlocking capabilities. We have a seasoned management team with expertise in each of the domains we fight for business in. And more important, we expect our annual revenues this year to be north of $500 million with our presence in 19 countries and growing. Thank you very much, and I hope everybody has a great day. Any questions?
Here I am, Andrew. I got a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind, if you're ready.
Sure, man.
Okay, so I love questions too. Answers are great too. So you just mentioned a recent M&A you did, right? What did you mention? What that company was called? What was that company called?
Yeah, we just released actually the announcement. It's scheduled to close before the end of this quarter, but all the definitive docs have now been signed. And that company is called ANS.
ANS. So walk me through a little bit, sort of, the opportunity that you saw with ANS to combine with some of your, already existing stuff potentially.
Yeah. So my thesis on this is really simple, which is the telecommunications space and the infrastructure for telecommunication is matured, and it's got predictable revenue streams and great earnings. And the EV space is like, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. You don't really know
Right.
where it's going. And so we acquired this telecommunication business that works on small cells and all that. And the goal, as we see it, is to prepare for the install of the electrification systems, not only with the hopeful passage of the infrastructure bill, but just common sense that more and more Americans want electric vehicles. But they don't want electric vehicles when their anxiety of how they're going to charge it flares up. And so by buying this telecommunication company, the workforce similarities are very, very similar to the same person that installs the EV systems. So we buy
Interesting.
telecom multiples because the EV multiples are out of control, and then we introduce our EV strategy into that. And so we look to eventually cover the entire country and world with this strategy where we buy and then integrate. But I love the predictability of the telecom work that we have. And so we don't take the same worker and make him now work on both. Of course not, because we've got too much work in the telecom space.
Right.
We train and build a new workforce that works alongside that person. And so it's a
So
super exciting time for us.
it's almost a sort of an infrastructure play a little bit. Is that correct? Am I understanding that right?
That's exactly right. And it turns out
Interesting.
it turns out in the EV space, unless you're Tesla or an electric vehicle manufacturer who's basing their earnings on 2028 to get their market cap, in the infrastructure side, when you have to permit and provision and maintain an EV system, a charging system, you've got actually real profit there to do that work. The guy who doesn't get the profit is the guy who sadly is, the car is subsidized by the government. The charging port might be subsidized by equity investors and whatnot. But when you have to actually dig the hole and put the system in, that doesn't get subsidized. There's meat on that. And so the way that we see it is that by providing the infrastructure in these early stages, it gives us the opportunity to kind of position ourselves similar to the way that the telecommunication world works. First,
Right.
1G comes in, you rip out 1G, you put in 2G.
Right.
2G comes in, you rip it out, you put in 3G. And so as the EV market continues to evolve, we're really doing the unglamorous work of installing and maintaining those systems while simultaneously doing it on the telecom side as well.
So zooming out just a little bit, and maybe less from operation standpoint, and maybe just more from a little bit of your own perspective, like what is the next application of charging? Obviously, you're talking about electric vehicles. That's everyone's main focus right now. I mean, can we go look to the horizon a little bit? What's kind of like the next application or two of this kind of charging?
I mean, I think it's twofold. One, charging is still kind of in its very infancy stages, right?
Absolutely.
Yesterday I met with a really amazing company that is in Norway, trying to pave the roads with pavers that you could charge your car on. And in
Oh my
Norway,
gosh,
in
that's
Norway,
cool.
where they have so much hydropower, so to speak, they can afford to burn off some power. Whereas in the United States, natural gas, we can't afford to do that. And so I think that we have a real challenge domestically here, which is how do we innovate with the political landscape up and down the way it is? And so I think what you'll see more in the U.S. market are these fixed stations, and these fixed stations charging. You'll see gas stations starting to retrofit their their pumps to electric. But I believe there's a world one day where an autonomous vehicle wakes up and goes to your apartment complex and recharges you and keeps recharging people along the ecosystem. I can't imagine that there's not going to be great innovation, but I still think we're 10, 12 years away from that. And so over the next 10 to 12 years, we need to install somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million charging stations domestically just to meet the demand of cars that we're going to have on the road. So that's why we focused on this unglamorous side, because we know there's certainty in that, just like we know there's certainty in the telecom space going from 5G over the next 3 years to 6G, 4 to 10 years. And so it's just a kind of, for us, a rinse and repeat. We understand where the infrastructure play is. It's a global opportunity, but we're not trying to build the next Tesla. We're trying to help the next
Mhm.
Tesla owner be able to reduce their anxiety by there being enough charging ports out there for them to drive, hopefully in the future, cross country.
Awesome stuff, Andrew. Appreciate you answering those couple of follow-up questions. Really intriguing stuff I just heard on Charge Enterprises. Hope the chat liked this one also. Andrew Fox, he's founder and CEO of Charge Enterprises on OTC. It's ticker CRGE. And one of our lovely producers just put up your URL here, www.charge.enterprises. Any other quick ways that prospective investors can get a hold of you?
a@charge.us is my email address, and I
Cool.
welcome all. I prefer questions and answer, than presenting. So anybody has any email that anything they ever want to ask, I'm always kind of, you're pushing an open door with me in terms of trying to get responses back.
That's awesome. And say the email again. It's just your first letter, right? Of your first name?
a@charge.us.
Probably couldn't make it any easier than just the first letter. I like it. All right, sir. I'll let you get to your weekend. Andrew Fox, thank you, sir, for joining us.
Have a great day, buddy.
All right, later.